You're driving home. It's late. The roads are empty. You check your mirror, and there they are, flashing lights in the distance, getting closer. Your heart rate spikes before you've even done anything wrong. The officer approaches your window, shines a light in your face, and then asks something that sounds so simple, so harmless. "So, where are you coming from tonight?" That question could be the difference between walking away in 5 minutes and spending the next 5 hours handcuffed in the back of a car, and almost nobody realizes it. Have you ever wondered why police ask seemingly obvious questions? Questions they probably already know the answer to? There's a psychological chess match happening inside every traffic stop, every doorstep conversation, every casual chat with an officer. And if you don't know the rules, you're playing a game you cannot win. By the end of this video, you will never hear a police question the same way again. Because the truth is, most of what you think you know about talking to law enforcement is not just wrong, it's dangerous. Stick with me because we're about to decode the hidden language of every single question an officer has ever asked you, and the first one might already be too late. Let's rewind to that traffic stop. The officer hasn't even told you why you were pulled over yet. The very first words out of their mouth are often, "Do you know why I stopped you?" Pause right there. Think about what's happening. They are asking you to do their job for them. On the surface, it feels like a courtesy. You want to be polite, right? You want to seem cooperative, so you start guessing. Was I speeding? Did I roll through that stop sign? Here's where it gets strange. The moment you admit to a possible violation, you have just become the prosecution's star witness against yourself. The officer didn't have to prove you were speeding. You just confessed to it. In many jurisdictions, that verbal admission is recorded on their dash cam and their body cam. It's gold for them. It's a disaster for you. But what if you say, "No, officer, I have no idea"? That feels rude, doesn't it? That tension you feel, the pressure to be helpful, that is the single most effective tool in law enforcement's psychological arsenal. They are counting on your politeness. They are betting that your mother taught you to respect authority so well that you will literally talk yourself into a ticket, or worse, an arrest. This changes everything about how you view a simple conversation, because the reality is completely different from what movies and TV shows teach us. Police are not required to be your friend. Their job is investigation, and every question is a tool. So let's pull back the curtain on the top 5 questions police ask and what they really mean. Question number 1. Do you mind if I search your car? You've heard this a million times in body cam footage. It sounds casual. It sounds almost like a formality. But let's decode the translation. What they are actually saying is, "I do not have enough evidence to search your car legally, so I need you to give up your constitutional rights voluntarily." In the US, the Fourth Amendment protects you from unreasonable searches. Without probable cause or a warrant, they cannot just rip your doors open. But there is a massive loophole, consent. If you say, "Sure, go ahead," you just erased your protection. You handed them the keys to your privacy. And here is the psychological trap. Officers are trained to ask this question in a tone that implies you have no choice. They might say, "I'm going to take a quick look in your vehicle, okay?" That's not a command. That's a request disguised as a statement. But because they are standing there with a gun and a badge, your brain registers it as an order. Almost nobody talks about this part. You are legally allowed to say no. You can say, "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." Will that make them suspicious? Maybe. But suspicion is not evidence. And a polite, firm refusal to a search is not a crime. In fact, it is the single most effective way to protect yourself from things you didn't even know were in your car, like a passenger's forgotten item or a false accusation. But wait, what if you have nothing to hide? That's the classic response, right? If you're innocent, why not just let them look? This is where the documentary-style reality check comes in. You have no idea what nothing to hide looks like to a police officer. A loose pill that isn't yours. A pocket knife that breaks a local ordinance, a dark stain that they say looks like drugs. Once you consent, you lose the right to argue about whether they found something. You invited them in, and that is a door you cannot close. Let's escalate the tension. Imagine you're walking down the street. A patrol car rolls up. The officer rolls down the window and asks, "Hey, can I talk to you for a second?" Instantly, you feel that spike of cortisol. You stop, because stopping feels mandatory. But here's a pattern interrupt that could save your freedom. You do not have to stop. In the United States, under Terry versus Ohio, police can briefly detain you if they have reasonable suspicion. But a random, "Hey, come here," on a public sidewalk, that is a consensual encounter. You can say, "Sorry, I'm in a hurry," and keep walking. But the question itself, "Can I talk to you?" is a trap. If you say yes and walk over to the car, You have just voluntarily detained yourself. Now, if they smell something or see something, that consensual chat turns into a legal stop, and everything you say from that moment on is evidence. This is the open loop I mentioned earlier. Why do police rely on these soft questions instead of just ordering you around? Because orders trigger resistance. Questions trigger compliance. It's a psychological hack. When someone asks you a question, your brain is wired to want to answer it. That's basic human nature. We want to be helpful. We want to resolve the social tension. But the moment you realize that the officer is not your friend, not your teacher, and not your priest, but an adversary in a legal game, you start to see the matrix. Let's go deeper. Question 3. Have you been drinking tonight? You're leaving a bar, you had 2 beers over 3 hours, you feel fine, the officer pulls you over for a broken taillight, you think, I'm under the limit, I'll be honest. So you say, I had a couple, but I'm fine. Congratulations, you just gave them probable cause for a DUI investigation. It doesn't matter that you were under the legal limit. The admission of any alcohol consumption changes the dynamic. Now they can ask you to step out, now they can perform field sobriety tests. Now they have a reason to bring out the breathalyzer, and here's the twist you didn't see coming. In many states, you are not legally required to answer that question. You can respectfully say, Officer, I'm not going to answer that. Or, I'm going to remain silent. Does that make you look guilty? Maybe, but being suspected of a crime is not a crime. The burden of proof is on them, not on you. The real danger is that people assume if they are polite and honest, the system will be fair. But the system isn't about fairness, it's about evidence. And your own mouth is the easiest source of evidence they will ever find. We need to talk about the interrogation room, because that is where the masters play. You've seen the shows, 2 detectives, a cup of coffee, a friendly demeanor. Look, we just want to clear this up. If you didn't do it, just help us understand. This is called the Reed technique. It is a 9-step psychological manipulation designed to elicit a confession, and it works terrifyingly well. Studies suggest that innocent people confess up to 25% of the time when subjected to these tactics. 25%. The questions here are devastating. Is there any chance you touched her by accident? If you didn't do it, why did your fingerprints show up? Maybe you just blacked out and don't remember? Every single one of these questions is a trap. They aren't asking for information. They are offering you an excuse. They are building a ladder for you to climb down from the truth. They want you to say, well, maybe I did push him, but it was an accident. Boom, you just confessed to assault. Here's the #1 rule that defense attorneys will scream from the rooftops. Do not answer questions without a lawyer present. You have the right to remain silent. But in the moment, that silence feels deafening. It feels like you're admitting guilt. It feels like you're being rude. And then something unexpected happens. The detective leans back and says, if you're innocent, why won't you talk to us? Only guilty people ask for lawyers. That line is so effective, it should be illegal. But it's not, and it is a complete lie. Asking for a lawyer is not an admission of guilt. It is an exercise of your most fundamental right. The Supreme Court has ruled over and over again that silence cannot be used against you. But in the psychological pressure cooker of an interrogation room, that truth feels hollow. Let's give you a real-world anchor. Think about the Central Park Five. Teenagers, interrogated for hours. They were fed information, pressured, manipulated with false promises, and eventually confessed to a crime they did not commit. They spent years in prison. Why? Because they answered the questions. They thought if they just explained themselves, the police would believe them. They didn't realize that the police weren't trying to find the truth. They were trying to close the case. Now, let's bring this back to the average person on the street, because not everyone is going to be in an interrogation room, but everyone will talk to a cop eventually. Question 4. Do you know how fast you were going? This is a variation of the opening question. They know how fast you were going. The radar gun told them. They are testing your honesty and your awareness. If you say about 80 and the radar said 85, they now have a discrepancy. That discrepancy looks like lying, and lying makes them angry. The safer route? I'm not sure, officer. Or simply silence. You don't have to estimate your speed. You don't have to admit to anything. You can accept the ticket without arguing, but arguing is exactly what they want, because an argument gives them more time to observe you, more time to ask more questions, and more time to find something else. This is the concept of pretextual stops. The broken taillight, the rolling stop, the slightly wide lane change, those are excuses. The real reason for the stop is to investigate a hunch, drugs, warrants, or just a bad feeling. And the only way they turn that hunch into evidence is by getting you to talk. Think about the most dangerous phrase in the English language when dealing with police. I'll be honest with you, whenever someone says that, they are about to incriminate themselves. They are about to offer up information that was not requested. I'll be honest, I did have a joint earlier this week. I'll be honest, my license is suspended, but I'm driving because my mom is sick. Stop. The police are not your therapist. They are not your judge. They are not there to help you explain your situation. They are there to collect facts, and every fact you give them is a puzzle piece that fits into a case against you. Let's talk about the fifth and final question, the one that breaks people. Is there anything illegal in the car? On the surface, it's a simple yes or no, but psychologically, it's a masterpiece of manipulation. If you say no, and they find something, even a prescription bottle that isn't yours, you are now a liar. Lying to a police officer is a crime in many places. If you say yes, you've just confessed. What is the correct answer? Officer, I don't consent to searches, and I have nothing to say about the contents of my vehicle. Does that sound robotic? Yes. Does that sound suspicious? Possibly. But let me tell you a story. There was a driver in Tennessee who was pulled over. The officer asked that exact question. Anything illegal? The driver politely declined to answer. The officer asked again. The driver repeated his refusal. The officer brought a drug dog. The dog alerted. They tore the car apart. They found nothing. Absolutely nothing. The dog was wrong, but the driver didn't go to jail because he didn't answer the question. If he had said no, and the dog alerted even with no drugs found, the officer could have claimed the driver was nervous or that the lie indicated consciousness of guilt. By staying silent, the driver gave them no ammunition. That driver walked away. His car was a mess, but he was free. Here is the major twist that changes everything. Most people believe that if you are innocent, you should cooperate. That is what society tells us. But the law does not require you to help the police investigate you. The Fifth Amendment exists precisely because the founders knew that even innocent people can be trapped by their own words. You have the right to remain silent. But the problem is most people don't know how to exercise that right. They try to pick and choose. I'll answer the easy questions, but not the hard ones. That doesn't work. Once you start talking, you establish a pattern of cooperation. The moment you stop, you look suspicious. The only reliable way to protect yourself is a clean break. You say, "Officer, I'm going to remain silent. I would like to speak to an attorney." And then you stop talking. Not just stop answering hard questions. Stop talking entirely. No small talk, no jokes, no explanations. And then something unexpected happens. The officer might get frustrated. They might say to me, "I'm just trying to help you." They might say, "If you're innocent, you have nothing to worry about." These are closing arguments designed to break your resolve. But here's the documentary-style reality check. Police are legally allowed to lie to you. They can say they have your fingerprints. They can say a witness identified you. They can say they're trying to go easy on you. All of that is legal, but you cannot lie to them. The game is rigged, so the only winning move is to stop playing. Let's close the loops we opened. We started with a traffic stop and a simple question. Where are you coming from? Now you know. That question establishes context. It gives them a reason to ask about alcohol, about drugs, about why you're in that neighborhood. It builds a timeline, and if you lie, even about something small, that lie can be used to impeach your credibility later. We talked about the search question. The magic words are, "I do not consent." Say them clearly, say them calmly, then shut your mouth. We talked about the interrogation room. The only safe answer is to ask for a lawyer, not a minute later, not after you've explained yourself, immediately. And we talked about the psychology of politeness. That is the trapdoor. The moment you prioritize being liked over being free, you have lost. So here's the reflection. This isn't about being anti-police. This isn't about resisting legitimate authority. This is about understanding the mechanics of a system that is designed to collect evidence. Police officers are doing their job. You should be allowed to do yours, which is protecting your own liberty. The next time an officer asks you a question, pause, feel the pressure, recognize the open loop, and then make a choice that most people are too afraid to make. Choose silence, choose the lawyer, choose your rights. Because the question isn't just what they are asking. The question is whether you are smart enough to hear what they are really saying. What's the closest you've ever come to talking yourself into trouble with the police? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to understand your rights before you ever need them, make sure you're subscribed. Because knowledge isn't just power. In this situation, it's the difference between a story you tell at dinner and a story you tell your lawyer.